One.
Hi everyone! Today we'll be talking about animal behavior with ecology. This entire presentation was made with the help of myself, Macy Ghoulish, and Caitlin Osborne. When we first heard about the project, we had no idea what to do, so we searched up the meaning for ecology. We found that ecology is a branch of biology that deals with the relations of organisms to one another and their physical surroundings. So we thought it was obvious to do our project on how animals behave in their natural habitat. Before we get into the main behavioral types of animals, let's start off with explaining ecology. Now, what is ecology? Ecology is a branch of biology dealing with the relations of organisms to one another and to their physical surroundings. The word itself is derived from the Greek words meaning study of and house or living things. Ecology deals with how animals have a niche in their ecosystems and where they fit on different trophic levels. There are two categories, which differ greatly, that an organism can fall into when in an ecosystem. Those are either a producer, such as a grass or tree, or a consumer, like a mouse or eagle. And that brings us to ecosystems. Ecosystems are areas on the planet that contain both living and non-living factors. Living and non-living factors are simpler examples of biotic and abiotic factors. Biotic factors are any living or once living component that affects the population of another organism or the environment. This includes animals that consume the organism and the living food that the organism consumes. Biotic factors also include human influence, pathogens, and disease outbreaks. Then there are abiotic factors. Abiotic factors are non-living physical and chemical elements of an environment. These factors are important for the survival of the organisms of that environment. But back to how ecosystems work. An example could be a kelp forest, as seen here. The kelp itself is the producer of the ecosystem, and then the consumers of the ecosystem could be a sea urchin or sea otter. All the consumers and producers of this ecosystem are very important. For example, if the sea otter dies, the sea urchin population will skyrocket. The sea urchins will continuously feed on kelp until there is none left and the ecosystem will fold in on itself. And to show how each ecosystem works in this area, food chains and food webs were created to show the eating patterns of animals in each ecosystem. A hierarchical series of organisms displaying the flow of energy through an ecosystem is called a food chain. Food chains start with the main provider of all energy on Earth, the sun. The next link is almost always some sort of plant life. This is because plants are able to use light energy from the sun and turn it into food, which for the plant is sugar. This is done using a process called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process by which green plants and some other organisms use sunlight to synthesize foods to form carbon dioxide and water. Photosynthesis usually uses the green pigment chlorophyll, which is found in the organelle chloroplasts. Oxygen is a byproduct produced by photosynthesis along with sugar. The next animal in the chain is an animal on which feeds on the plant. The chain continues with animals who consume the previous animal until the final link in the chain is a decomposer, which turns the food into compost and releases carbon into the atmosphere. This is also a part of the carbon cycle. In this specific food chain, the sun is left out of the diagram but would be placed before the grass link. The producer is stated as grass. The next organism in the food chain is a primary consumer. This means that the organism is the first consumer in the chain. This primary consumer in this food chain is a grasshopper. The grasshopper eats the grass, making the next link in the food chain. Frogs are a predator to grasshoppers, making it a secondary consumer in this specific chain. The tertiary consumer is the third order consumer in the food chain. The snake is the tertiary consumer of this food chain. The final consumer is the last link in the food chain besides the decomposer. The final composer is the hawk. This is because the hawks eat the snake as the previous consumer. The last organism of the chain is the decomposer. This organism decomposes dead matter and releases the carbon back into the atmosphere. This is the last link in the food chain.
web is a device used in ecology to demonstrate the flow of energy in an ecosystem. The diagram shows basic predator and prey relationships. The further along an organism is on the food web, the less animals it has as predators. Food webs consist of many interconnected food chains. The lower or beginning section of the food web consists of producers and lower level consumers. The start of a food web consists of primary producers. These are organisms that make their own food from sunlight through a process of photosynthesis. The next level in the food web is comprised of primary consumers. These are organisms who feed on the primary producers. The animals that feed on primary consumers are called secondary consumers. The predators are the next section of the food web and are called tertiary consumers. The next level of predators are called quaternary consumers. The web continues with levels of consumers until it gets to the last level, known as final consumers. Some food webs complete the chain with the last level consisting of decomposers. Food webs are very similar to food chains and are often described to be more complex food chains. Both food webs and food chains show the predator-prey relationship throughout an ecosystem.
The molecular food web has 4 trophic levels. The beginning is the level of primary producers. These include stargrass, red oatgrass, and the acacia tree. These are members of the primary producer trophic level because they use sunlight to make their own food through the process of photosynthesis. The animals that they feed on primary producers are in the next trophic level. These are primary consumers. The primary consumers in this food web include grasshoppers, harvester ants, topi, termites, warthogs, dung beetles, and hares, wildebeests, gazelles, impalas, and mice. Some of these animals are not consumed by secondary consumers, and their map skips secondary and finishes with tertiary consumers. An example of this is the topi. The topi feeds on the primary producer of the red oatgrass and is in the predator-prey relationship with 3 tertiary consumers. These are hyenas, lions, and Ruppel's vultures. The topi can skip having any secondary consumers because no secondary consumer in the ecosystem feeds on the species. Most other organisms, however, have a secondary consumer. An example of an animal with a secondary consumer would be a harvester ant. The harvester ant feeds on stargrass as the primary producer, then is fed upon by aardvarks. The aardvark then is led to the hyena, being that the hyena is the predator of aardvarks.
Of animal behavior. Animal behavior is the scientific study of the wild and wonderful ways in which animals interact with each other, the other living beings in the environment.
Animal behavior really focuses on the factors that are given from its ecosystem. This includes the biotic and abiotic factors that were mentioned and explained earlier, but it also includes the environmental and genetic factors. Environmental factors can affect morphological and physiological development, and in turn behavior develops as a result of that animal's shape and internal workings. And genetic factors give influences on morphology and physiology. Genes create a framework within which the environment acts to shape the behavior of an individual animal. Without these factors, our ecosystems would be a total mess.
Let's hop into the general behaviors these animals have. Understanding how genes and environment come together to shape animal behavior is also an important underpinning of the field. Genes capture the evolutionary responses of prior populations to select on behavior. Environmental flexibility gives animals the opportunity to adjust to changes during their own lifetime. Scientists are drawn to the study of animal behavior for varied reasons, and the field is extremely broad, ranging from research on feeding behavior and habitat selection to mating behavior and social interactions. Many scientists study animal behavior because it sheds light on human beings. Research on non-human primates, for instance, continue to offer valuable perspectives into the causes and evolution of individual